it's a pleasure to be here, Chair. Minister, your budget unveiled a plan to eliminate 40,000 jobs in the federal public service by 2028-2029. Since then, 68,000 public servants have received the notice that they may be eligible to apply for the early retirement incentive as a mechanism to eliminate these jobs. Does Treasury Board have an estimate of how many of those 68,000 public servants will apply for the early retirement incentive?
Thank you for your question, and I welcome my critic from. I'm looking forward to have that coffee while our teams are working on scheduling that. Your question is on workforce adjustment. We have sent 68,000 letters to the people who may qualify for that program. There is certain options. We don't know how many will come forward, and that program will roll out after the Budget Implementation Act gets the royal assents. So at this point, we just, as per the bargaining agreement, we have sent those letters to them, and we'll have more to say when we have clarity on that.
Okay, thank you for that response. If not then, if you're not aware as to the number, how are departments organizing their job losses and restructuring if the government doesn't even have an estimate, if you don't have an estimate of how many public servants will voluntarily retire? That's a pretty important number for workforce adjustment planning.
We have sent those letters, and we don't know how many. I mean, we know how many qualifies, but we don't know how many will be eligible, because not everyone who's been sent the letters will be considered for that program. There is certain criteria. There's a skills and seniority. I'll ask because it's more technicality gets involved. I'll ask my deputy to
That's
give
fine,
you.
Minister. Thank you so much.
Just for the clarity,
Yeah.
it is for your benefits and the Canadians.
Minister,
who are
I don't have a lot of time, and you're not providing me with a lot of information. I'm going to move on.
Okay.
Thank you very much. In December, you announced the Public Service Pension Fund had an unpermitted surplus of $900 million, and that you were moving this money into the general revenues of government. Where will that money be spent, please?
Can I ask my colleague to repeat your question, please?
In December, you announced the Public Service Pension Fund had an unpermitted surplus of $900 million, and that you were moving this money into the general revenues of the government. You've seen this before. I'm sure you were briefed when you received this position. Where will this particular allotment be spent, President?
So in that pension funds, if we have any surplus of uncertain, there's a threshold, and if it's over that threshold, that money moves into trust funds. I could ask my deputy to clarify a little bit more for your benefit and the Canadians who are watching at home.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The money has indeed been brought back in. It's been invested, but there's been no decisions taken yet in terms of how that money will actually be spent.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move on again. In 2023, Minister Anand announced that departments would be ordered to find savings of $15 billion. However, the details were scant. Unsurprisingly, the 2024 and 2025 Public Accounts of Canada indicate that those savings have yet to be achieved. On Monday, I asked your department whether proposed savings announced in the Comprehensive Expenditure Review would be realized, or if it would be dealt a similar fate to the 2023 ill-hearted attempt of savings. A senior official actually stated, "I don't think you will see a decrease as compared to what was announced in the budget." Do you agree with that statement, President?
What I can tell you, that the review, comprehensive expenditure review, will achieve savings of $9 billion in 2026. 2027, $10 billion in 2027 to 2028, and 13 billion in 2028, 2029.
Okay, these are all projections. As I indicated, your government failed in the 2023 objectives, and I just received on Monday from a senior official a lack of confidence that these numbers will also be achieved. 100 days ago, exactly, the government unveiled the initial details of the CER, the comprehensive expenditure review in the budget, yet here we are today with your own department stating your own spending reductions will not be met despite the continuous forecast you're putting forward. And this isn't me doubting your savings, it's your own senior officials, which should be very concerning for you. So how do you expect Canadians to believe your government will actually lower spending as you've promised if your own Treasury Board officials don't?
I don't know where that coming from to you, but what I know, the proposals we received from
It's your
a
Comptroller
102
General. You
organization.
should probably
I'm
have
sorry,
a conversation with her.
Can I
Just
respond to that
a brief
question?
response, please.
Yeah. So those proposals for comprehensive expenditure review, we received from 102 organizations, other than DND, CBSA, CSIS, RCMP. All organizations, they have put forward this plan, and I believe those are the organizations who are delivering services to Canadians. They're responsible, and they have put forward this plan, and I'm confident that we will
Thank
achieve
you.
our.
We're going to go to
Right,
Mr.
President, thank you.
Gasparo, please.
Beaucoup.
There we go. Thank you, Minister. So my line of questioning is going to focus on the 25 and out and also the regulatory sandboxes. In particular, as the Parliamentary Secretary for Combating Crime, obviously I get an opportunity to speak with our brave men and women in the RCMP and the CBSA relatively regularly. For them and for others, can you just explain the difference between 25 and out and early retirement, please?
Very, very important question. First of all, I'd like to thank our frontline workers for keeping Canadians safe and sacrifices they make. It's commendable. There's a major difference between 25 and out and early retirement incentives. 25 and out is a permanent. That will stay if we pass this Budget Implementation Act. They're there to stay. Whereas that early retirement incentive, it is just for the time being, for a certain period of time, and it is temporary. So that is a major difference, and that officers, frontline officers, CBSA, firefighters, and others with a similar nature, they qualify if they have a service of 25 years operational service, and they could retire early without penalty. But that program will stay. It's permanently. That is proposed.
Great, thank you. And just moving on to the regulatory sandbox for a moment. So I've spent my private sector career financing clean energy projects and infrastructure. How can regulatory sandboxes help Canada's clean energy sector innovate at the pace needed to meet our climate objectives, part one, and part two, our energy demands into the 21st century?
So that Budget 2025 expands the use of regulatory sandboxes to department and agencies beyond Transportations Canada, Transport Canada, and Health Canada, which already have sandbox authority. These sandboxes help regulatory test new ideas safely before deciding on permanent rule change. They can only be used for the time limited. For example, if you're going to implement a rule or making a rule for any department, but you haven't tested that, whether it would be working or you will be achieving objective in delivering services to Canadians or contributing in the growth of our economy, it would be loss of time and loss of resources. So regulatory sandbox gives you that opportunity to test those ideas, innovative ideas, and see if you achieve the result, and then you make those rules and regulations so they can, benefit to Canadians, in delivering services.
Sure. And do other countries or other jurisdictions use regulatory sandboxes?
And my understanding is in G7, we're the only country who have very limited uses in 2 departments from 2019. But my understanding is that in G7, every other country is using this because this saves time, it saves resources, and it is, especially we're going through this critical time. This is a global shift. This is a time we need to act fast. We need to focus on delivery or innovations in timely manner so we can compete with the other economies and we can grow our economy. So these tools, which are safeguarded by regulations, have rigorous safeguards, they could be useful in achieving those objectives and put those rules in place. And we have Mike. Actually, he's very compassion. He has a compassion towards this, and very genuinely, his mind and soul is into this because he understands what it is. Because there's a misconception. I'm going to ask Mike if he can highlight, give a little bit clarity to my colleagues and the Canadians who are watching at home.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Perhaps I could give an example of a regulatory sandbox involving clean technology. In July 2025, the Department of Transport launched a regulatory sandbox to test what the safety requirements would be for battery-powered and hydrogen-powered locomotives. Currently, the rules around train safety are specifically geared towards diesel-powered locomotives. So this sandbox became particularly relevant as Canada's railways move towards decarbonizing their fleet. So before the sandbox was ever launched, Transport Canada commissioned a number of risk assessments to identify where the potential risks and how to mitigate them, and then established a series of strict safeguards, including things like ensuring that there would be a proper crew training, a proper oversight and inspections. The results of that sandbox would then be used to inform the evolution of the rail safety rules to support the introduction of low-emission clean technology.
I'll go to Madame Gaudreau, please.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll set my timer. Are you hearing the interpretation, Mr. President? Great. Thank you. I'll get back to the basics because from what I've heard, answers are not clear. I've asked the question, what is a regulatory sandbox? I'll take an analogy. I'll refer to what I've seen in other countries as well. We're giving ourselves a parcel, a sandbox, where within it we can build castles, do all sorts of things. In other countries, there have been requests in the name of economic prosperity, innovation. I want a little more. There are countries where these are huge beaches. And what I'm hearing this morning is that we'll add some, we'll maximize this new practice, and we'll regulate over time. There are three things that really make me feel that things might go off the rails. This is about safeguards. In the law, with competitors, how will we not create a distortion? That's the first thing. A regulator working closely with companies, well, of course, that creates potentially excessive closeness. You see where I'm going with that. And transparency. Decisions will be made, supposedly publicly. Will they be properly justified? As parliamentarians, will we be able to ensure safeguards are in place? Mr. Chair, when I hear officials, they've come here in person, and they're not able to answer us, how will we have oversight? How can I really vote in favor of this? So I'd like explanations, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
And it's really important to understand what is the regulatory sandboxes. There's so many speculations about it, so many misconceptions, and we have this regulatory sandboxes in two departments from 2019, Transport Canada and Health Canada. It's been used only once in Health Canada. If I'm not mistaken, Mike, is it Health Canada or Transport? Yeah. So it has there has to be a justification before even you're thinking of bringing forward any using this regulatory sandbox. There has to be justification. It has to go. You have to do it publicly, and then you have to come at the committee. And that all the regulations apply on that.
Mais nous
yes,
avons,
yes.
Monsieur le
But
Président,
we need to know how and when we will know. Because clearly, your answer isn't sufficient in my view. When and how will we know the transparency to not have ethical derailing? We need to think of the environment. There's conflicts of interest potentially. I don't think this is wise. This is what the public and even public servants are telling me.
There is a rigorous, as I said, and transparent process, and I believe in transparency. First, advance notice of the proposed use of sandbox is provided through department's forward regulatory plan, which is published annually. And then department would engage with relevant stakeholders and FTB partners during the development process. Once a sandbox is approved by the responsible minister, the department must make public a summary of new exemption, the decision-making process that led to this decision, and information on how stakeholders can provide feedback on this decision.
Monsieur le Président, mon temps est terminé, mais
My time is up, but my next turn, we're talking about the process. I want the criteria, the how and the when. That's my question. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Madame Gaudreau, Mrs. Block, please.
Thank you, Chair, and I will be splitting my time with my colleague, Mrs. Jansen. Welcome here, Minister Ali, your department officials, Deputy Minister. Hidden in the BIA were changes that would allow ministers to exempt nearly any company, person, or entity from any federal law except the criminal code. So I'm perhaps following up on some of the questions that my colleague, Ms. Gaudreau, had. My question is, what is the point of having a parliament pass laws when ministers can just give connected insiders exemptions from those laws?
Thank you for the questions. I think it's there is legal bindings on certain doing those innovative experiment. I think for that reason that this was proposed in this Budget Implementation Act, and because it's a technicality, I can ask my just for your benefit, it's clarity, because this is important to understand what it is and why it's being there. So I'm going to ask it just 30 seconds from my deputy to give you
30
clarity.
seconds.
Yeah, please.
Okay, thank
Thank
you. Mr. Chair, so there is not exemption from any law. The exemptions have to be relevant to the legislation or regulation the minister bringing forward the proposal is responsible for, so they're boxed in. Secondly, there is no exemption from the Conflict of Interest Act. That still applies. So the goal here is to allow ministers to create a sandbox for innovation and experimentation within the rule set that they are responsible for. And that drives experimentation and gives a chance to test things out. I know there's a lot of confusion about this rule set, but
I would suggest that, if you're watching Finance Committee and some of the questioning of some of the ministers there, the only law that doesn't provide exemptions is the Criminal Code. So here's another question for you. If there is no provision in the use of these powers that would exempt a minister from using them, there is no provision that exempts a minister from using them while Parliament is prorogued. So why is there no restriction on the use of these powers when Parliament is prorogued?
Thank you, Chair. I think there's a lot of misconception around regulatory sandboxes. This tool is there to help regulators test new ideas safely before deciding on permanent rule change. So it is.
Thank you.
It is.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I understand that you have some talking points that you have to provide back to us around these regulatory sandboxes, but what it says in the BIA is clear. And I think that parliamentarians are very concerned when you start to provide these kind of powers. They're called the King Henry VIII powers. So Canadians are concerned, parliamentarians are concerned. Go ahead.
Thank you, my colleague. I think it's your.
Sorry,
I don't want to get into that.
I thought you were going to answer the question, so maybe I can start my question instead.
I was going to
Minister,
talking point, so just
Minister,
respond to that. Okay.
At the last meeting, I was asking about this new exemption power, and which some are calling the King Henry Clause, and whether it would reduce red tape for small and medium-sized business. And I mean, it's a disaster right now out there in BC, 10% bankruptcy, and we find out it doesn't simplify a federal form, it doesn't shorten approval times, it doesn't shorten reporting requirements, and yet it's the only concrete red tape reduction measure in the entire budget. Like, when they're at this point, like, why this? Why just for the big guys? Because I know he talked about shred was going to be wonderful for small guys. Like, no coffee shop, no plumber, no construction workers ever going to use shred. Why just for the big guys?
Sure. I understand my colleague is more interested in getting the clips for their writing rather than
I'm going to interrupt you. I'm going to interrupt you, President.
Sure. I think
I'm sorry.
here to
I'm
respond
going to interrupt
to questions,
you, sir. That's
so,
inappropriate to make such a comment back at a member for a straightforward question. Please respond. Thank you.
I think it's if I'm here to respond to questions, that I should be given an opportunity to respond to that.
Our Minister, I'm going to interrupt here again. It's not the time to respond. It's the comment about the clip, I think, is rather demeaning and inappropriate. But please, I will allow you extra time. Please go ahead and respond, sir.
Chair, if you like, you give me that written script that I can read to in my response? That's what you want?
We'll
from me?
allow you time. We'll allow you time to respond,
So
sir.
I think it's when she asked a question, I should be given the time to respond to that question. Look, there's a lot of misconception. Regulatory sandboxes is help regulators test new ideas before deciding on government permanent rule changes. So, can you give me the water? I have a drink. Yeah, I'm done.
Ms. Sutz, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, President Ali and officials for being with us here today. I'm going to switch gears slightly just to touch on the recent decision around return to office requirements for public servants. As I know you know, President Ali, I have thousands of public servants who live in my riding who do incredible work, who do critical work every day serving Canadians. And I feel deeply. I feel for them in this moment, for their families. And I realize that this decision is creating uncertainty for employees in an already challenging time. Having worked in the public service, I started my career right out of school in the public service, spent 13 years doing that work. I understand the dedication, the commitment that it takes to serve Canadians in that capacity, whether they're in the office, remote, virtual, hybrid. So going forward, I will continue to work with you, with our government, with my National Capital Region colleagues, calling for meaningful flexibility as this policy is being implemented. I also know, President Ali, our government has multiple meetings coming up with union leadership, and I think seeking their input on implementation to help ensure that employees have the tools and the support that they need in their workplace is critically important. So I look forward to working with you, and please know that I'll continue to be advocating for that flexibility as this policy is implemented. Having said that, there are voluntary measures that are being prioritized in the workforce adjustments. And my question would be, how are these being managed, primarily through attrition rather than through involuntary departures?
Thank you, my colleague. That is a very important question, and I understand you have majority of your constituents from public service employees. And I like to thank all public service employees for their hard work, for their dedication serving Canadians, and their contributions for Canada. And we all know we're going through a global shift, through different times where we have to change the course of working. And we made a commitment during our election campaign to spend less and invest more and to grow the strongest economy in G7, and also to balance our operational budget in 3 years. So therefore, we're taking a transformative approach to public service to deliver on priorities that Canadians want. And at this critical time, I think is working together on site is necessary to build strong teams and effective collaborations. And of course, we'll continue to engage with the unions on how best to implement it, and our obligation and commitment to meet accommodations, the needs of employees remains unchanged. Since I have taken the office, I have multiple meetings with union leaders and my team is continuously in touch with them, and we will be getting their feedback and see how best we can implement.
Can you speak to the voluntary measures that are being offered specifically so that we're mitigating the involuntary departures?
So I could ask Bill if you can briefly.
Certainly, in 20 seconds, Minister, or Mr. Macaulay. So departments have identified positions that will be reduced, and then in order to reduce those, and it's based on, the work they do, the first line of defense, I'll say, is we notify employees they can put up their hands and voluntarily depart. And those are why those letters are going out. Early retirement incentive, if approved by Parliament, is coming, and that will be another option for those employees. And the goal there is to use those two vehicles to maximize voluntary departures. To the extent that there are, still employees left above what is in the budget, then we will use selection processes to go down to the right number. But the first wave is voluntary and early retirement incentives.
Thanks. Madame Gaudreau, please.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le
Ms.
Président.
Gaudreau. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now I'll pick up on criteria. I'll take an example. Economic prosperity. We need to be quick. We need to be efficient. We need to manage as if we were a company and not somewhere with the rule of law. I'm giving an example. What are the criteria and who will authorize this? For example, building a nuclear facility near, in my writing, in Rivière Rouge, the Red River, and there's potential. And in the name of economic prosperity, well, in the sandbox, we could set aside considerations for the environment. We could set aside social acceptability. So, in short, upstream, ahead of time, what are the criteria for this type of decision to never happen?
Thank you, Chair. I think that authority will be under the minister responsible, who would be using regulatory sandbox for any experiment or innovation idea before putting in rules in place. But I think this is more of technical question you'll be asking. If you allow me, I can ask Mike, who's expert in this particular area, so who can explain you for your understanding and the Canadians watching at home.
Okay. Merci de la question.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. There are requirements that are very strict associated with all of the sandboxes. The minister has to be certain that the sandbox is in the public interest. I'll just stop you right there. The question is, what is the public interest? We've asked, and we were told there's no definition. What is the public interest? In federal laws and at the provincial level, the public interest is not defined. That is because, according to the courts, specific decisions, the expression public interest is always contextualized in the specific law. So, for example, in the example you gave, the minister must ensure that there's an analysis of costs and benefits, that the risks are identified and addressed, that consultations with other jurisdictions, with Indigenous peoples and stakeholders are done. And there are requirements with transparency. The intention for the regulatory sandbox has to be published. And when the sandbox goes ahead, that has to be published on the website. And Finally, the president of the Treasury Board has to draft an annual report and list all of the sandboxes, including, okay, so the nuclear facility could already be underway, and a year later we could say we can't go back, we've already invested, and 3 years later we would see the collateral damage. Is that what I'm understanding? Thank you once again for the question. For every sandbox, exemptions must be very specific. There's nothing in the bill.
Commission. So nothing there would allow the minister to overrule that the independence and the safety regulations already in place.
Ben, moi, en terminant, Monsieur le Président, ce que je
To
demande,
conclude, Mr. Chair, what I'm asking, because clearly you know how I'll vote, I haven't had an answer. There are no criteria provided. I'm thinking of my constituents. They're really concerned. So I would call on you to provide the elements necessary to reassure people, because currently, at the outset, we're seeing that it's more like a beach, and there will be collateral damage once again, and it's not because the government since 2019 hasn't had any scandals, and that's what concerns me. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
We'll go to Mr. Patzer, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for joining us here today. I guess just right off the bat, kind of picking up on a different question I was asked earlier, how many regulations have been either changed or removed because of the regulatory sandboxes that have existed in transport and health for the past 6 years?
Thank you, Chair. Just for the clarity, you're asking overall red tape review or particularly just for the sandboxes used?
Just for the sandboxes used. I mean, you said there was one used earlier in one of the departments. You didn't specify what about the other department, but I would like to know that if this was such a resounding success for the past 6 years that you have to bring this in for every other department, surely to goodness you can tell us how many regulations have been changed or repealed because of regulatory sandboxes.
It was just one time it was used, and one department. It's in two departments, Transport Canada and Health Canada. And it was used by one department, and I'm gonna, if you allow me, I can ask Bill to give you clarity on that, how many were removed or not. So just for your benefit.
20 seconds.
Yeah.
How many?
Yeah, please.
I cannot give you an answer how many, but we can talk about the freight train inspection as one example where their rules were successfully tested and changed. And Mike, is there another one you want to add in the 5 seconds I've left you?
So it's used more than once then?
So with respect to regulatory sandboxes, those provide a narrow exemption as opposed to repealing an entire regulation. The evidence then collected in a regulatory sandbox is used to then inform the regulator for subsequent amendments.
Okay, so were there any subsequent amendments, though?
Yes, absolutely. I can provide some examples. With respect to, for example, the e-manifest that the Secretary mentioned, Transport Canada ran a regulatory sandbox in 2020 to test the use of e-shipping documents, whether they could be used to safely replace paper documents. So this allowed Transport Canada to then use that to evolve the transportation of dangerous good regulations into greater alignment with international standards.
Okay, thank you very much. Minister, with the early retirement incentive that is in place, where is the money going to come from for that incentive?
That would be from Public Service Pension Fund.
Is it the overages from it that'll be used for it because the plan still has to be utilized and made whole? So where exactly within that fund is that going to come from?
As I said, it's Public Service Pension Fund. It'll be coming from there.
Not the overages?
I mean, can you give a clarity of your question, please?
Well, I mean, the pension fund has done well, and there's extra money there, right? And normally that would go back into general revenue, but is that money being used to make the taxpayer whole, or is that money going to be used to fund your early retirement buyout?
I think that, again, there's in your question, there's a certain mix-up, but it's what I can say that it's not that money is coming from public service pension fund to deal with the early retirement. And if you want a bit more clarity, I can ask my team to respond to that.
Thank you,
You
Mr.
don't
Chair.
know the minister.
Sorry?
I can be really
I'm sorry,
quick.
I know, but you.
I can be really quick,
Really
here,
quick.
Mr. Chair. The excessive surplus that was removed is still in the CRF. There is still a surplus in the pension plan itself. As the minister said, the early retirement incentive, if approved by Parliament, would be funded from the pension plan, not from the money taken out.
Okay, thank you very much. Minister, there you said earlier 16,000 FTEs are going to be reduced. We have seen reports that it's actually as high as 40,000. Can you confirm whether it's full-time, whether it's part-time, or what are the exact implications of the 40,000 people that will lose their job?
Chair, what I said is 16,000 full-time equivalent position will be reduced over three years.
Okay, so no part-time jobs will be lost?
What I said is 16,000 full-time equivalents. That's it's in my statement.
So the other reported 40,000 from other departments is wrong?
I can say what I gave my statement. You referred to my statement, earlier statement, so I'm sticking with that. So your question, because these are detailed answers and you will not like them, so I'm sticking with that. Because if you want clarity, we can go on.
We're out of time, but Mr. Matthews, you look like you want to respond really quickly.
One quick addition for clarity. Because of the way the reductions will work, if there are 10 jobs that are identical, but only 7 of them will remain, all 10 people will get a letter saying your job may be impacted. So you will see the number of letters issued actually exceeds the number of jobs that will be reduced.
Thank you. We'll go to Ms. Rochefort, and we have a bit of extra time, so we'll probably do a last two couple 4-minute rounds. We'll go Ms. Rochefort, then Ms. Block, and then we'll squeeze in Ms. Church.
Oui, merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister Ali.
A statement quickly and also one question. I've been surprised since we've started to discuss more publicly regulatory sandboxes by the amount of misinformation that has been circulating. And I do find that there's a section that out of the proposed legislation that sort of it seems to be picked out of context always. And I just want to point to it. It is the one which speaks to granting a minister the authority to make an order exempting an individual, an association, or an organization for a period of not more than 3 years from the application of a provision of an act of Parliament under their responsibility or an instrument made under such an act. And so I find that these statements are made, they're taken out of context, and people then come to conclusions that are absolutely incorrect. When there is a policy, that is online, that people can read, policy on regulatory sandboxes, that is really well composed. It provides, scope, context, definitions are in there, principles. It provides how accountability, roles, and responsibilities. And I understand that there's never anything perfect, but I think a very first step when we make public comments is to go and read what's out there, what's been provided by bureaucrats that do exceptional work. And so for me, that's an important comment that I wanted to put on record. But my question is completely different, and it is addressed to Deputy Minister Matthews, and it follows Madame Cousy's line of questioning with respect to the comprehensive expenditure review. And from the line of questioning, I'm getting a sense that there has never been and there won't ever be any savings from any comprehensive expenditure review that the government does. And I was wondering if you might want to comment on that and maybe expand on that.
Certainly, Mr. Chair, a couple of points. The conversation that was referred to earlier at committee involved, what will the savings be? So these reductions from SIR will be removed from department's estimates, and this committee will get to see the main estimates with those reductions. That being said, every expenditure exercise I have ever been involved in also happens at the same time when the government is investing in other areas, and this is no different. So you will see these reductions, but at the same time, you're seeing investments in other areas. So the best example here would be national defense. They've been asked to find 2% in savings, but at the same time, they're growing. So that, in effect, is really a reallocation of their spending. So if you're expecting to see national defense projections for spending next year to be lower than the current year, absolutely not. The government's announced they're investing in that area. You will see other departments that are undergoing the same thing, where they've reduced in one area, but they're spending in another. So what I would suggest is, if the committee wants to study this further, when you engage with departments, understand where the reductions have happened or where they plan to get the reductions, but at the same time, ask about other investments the government has made in the department that may offset the planned reductions, because it is about reallocation here.
Absolutely. It is about reallocation. That is the purpose of doing reviews, expenditure reviews, is to find savings so that you can engage and direct your funding to what is necessary in a particular context. Would that be correct?
That is correct.
Just quickly, I wanted to touch on Budget 2025 also announces a reduction in up to 1,000 executives in the public service over the next 2 years. Can one of you, Minister or Deputy Minister, comment on that, the importance of this initiative? What does it mean? What is the impact as well on the public service of losing this intellectual capacity?
Thank you for your question. As we launched that comprehensive expenditure review and workforce adjustment, trying to bring our public service employees to on sustainable levels, then executive must align with that workforce. That, to be fair, this is more fairness and transparency, and we'll be reducing 1,000 executives over the next 2 years. And all organizations have been asked to reduce their executive workforce by 12%.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. That's it for me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. We'll go to, actually, we'll be able to do a couple 5-minute rounds. Mrs. Block and then Ms. Church.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm not sure that I'm going to take up 5 minutes. However, they do pass very quickly, as we are very aware and often are trying to keep answers short. So I want to go back to the intervention that my colleague Ms. Goudreau made, and I have to agree with her when it comes to these sandboxes that, as you refer to them, that are included in Part 2 of C-15. And I would have to say that this sandboxes, which I believe are subsections 3 and 7 in this Act, are at best ambiguous and only require the agreement of one other minister within a cabinet, which I think would be fairly easy to find. And so when you think about the fact that you are providing the ability for a minister to exempt a company, an individual, at their discretion, what you're actually doing is providing that minister to pick winners and losers. And so my question for you is this: if the laws and regulations that we have in place stand in the way of innovation, competitiveness, and economic growth, to the point where ministers have to provide exemptions, why are you not simply just repealing them?
Thank you for the question, Chair. As I said, there is a misconception around about regulatory sandboxes. And these regulation sandboxes is to help regulations keep pace with innovation. That I think there is rigorous regulations around them. Minister has to justify why they're being used. So I think it's every minister will have that. We're providing this tool that they cannot just unilaterally use it without giving a justification. It has to justify. They have to justify before using that. So,
So-
I think it's
Minister Ali,
yeah.
you actually haven't answered my question, which is fine. So I'm going to actually move on and just follow up on the suggestion that your deputy minister made in terms of reviewing the CER. And I'm wondering if we could book 1 or 2 meetings to look at this after the estimates.
Let me address that. We actually have an invite out for the president to come back on the CER. Mr. Matthews and others, you mentioned about bringing it or having a couple other departments. Can we, besides the meeting with the president, the 1 hour with the president's secretary, the president and the secretary board that we agreed to, can we just add a couple then? After, because we have the estimates and we're filled up with this budget stuff. Great. We'll follow up with everyone after, but thanks. Sorry, the clock has restarted.
Oh, that's okay. How much time did I have left?
You have about 1 minute and 30 seconds.
I don't know, do any of my colleagues have a question they'd like to follow up with that they perhaps didn't get to ask with that 1 minute?
Yeah, I have one.
Great.
Minister, are you aware of any requests that were denied for a regulatory sandbox from either the Department of Health or the Department of Transport in the last 6 years?
I'm not aware. I can ask my team that if they are aware.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I would just point to a specific provision in the proposal that specifically means the minister is not compelled to even consider a regulatory sandbox.
Okay, but the whole point of this is the minister has said this is absolutely necessary to have in place for innovation and how important this is going to be going forward. Yet you're telling me for 6 years there was only one request, and that's it.
Okay. There were a number of regulatory sandbox that Transport Canada implemented, and it helped significantly with the evolution of regulatory frameworks. That included, for example, shifting from paper documents to electronic documents, which helps small businesses quite a bit. Also helped introduce safe introduction of artificial intelligence with respect to railway operations, a number of other important innovation as well.
Okay. Well, let me interrupt. Sorry. Well, our time's up, but what we had heard earlier, there was just one use, but you're saying there's several. Maybe you can provide in writing, because we're running out of time, provide in writing to the committee all the times it has been used for health and transport, if that's okay?
So, Mr. Chair, if it's okay, only transport has used it, but we will come back with a list of how often. If we can, we'll find out if there's any rejected, but I'm not sure we'll be able to find that as well.
Ms. Church, welcome to OGGO. 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for having me here today. Just because I think we focused quite a bit on regulatory sandboxes and the confusion that surrounds them, maybe let me focus just a few direct questions. Perhaps, maybe first of all, just to clarify a comment that came up from my colleagues across the table here, that sandboxes are somehow beneficial for the big guys, not the little guys, when actually my understanding is that really these sandboxes are designed exactly for the opposite, to help innovators, to help small and medium-sized businesses, to support economic growth, to help us support innovation and productivity. So could I maybe just ask Deputy Matthews, could you speak a little bit to how we ensure that these regulatory sandboxes are accessible to small and medium-sized businesses who certainly wouldn't have the same resources as large organizations?
Certainly. So I think there is maybe a preconception that a sandbox is only available to one company. The idea here is that the minister would evaluate proposals, and a good sandbox would impact numerous organizations at the same time. What we hear when we engage industry associations is from the innovators that they don't have space to actually test out and float their new ideas. So it's supposed to create that experimentation which is open to all if approved by the minister. And Mike has already mentioned one example that benefits small business, but Mike, you may want to talk about another one where an innovator came in with something.
Certainly. Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. red tape disproportionately affects small businesses. So by providing a clear pathway for small businesses or entrepreneurs to be able to engage with the regulator and suggest innovation or potential targeted exemptions in order to support their technological development or new ideas is part of the idea. So the example I gave was around e-manifests, which would have allowed small transportation companies the ability to apply to Transport Canada for an equivalency certificate and demonstrate that they could safely use e-shipping or digital versions rather than paper copy versions.
Thank you. And just in the case of concerns around a conflict of interest where the minister or government has been lobbied on behalf of organizations seeking a regulatory sandbox, can you speak to the type of controls that are in place to prevent those conflicts of interest?
Good.
Do you want to?
No, go ahead.
Deputy?
So the minister can only create a sandbox, responsible minister, in the space where the legislation and the regulations are actually within his purview. So that's the initial box. Rules like conflict of interest and those regimes still apply. There's no way around those. So if a minister felt he or she had a conflict, that would still kick in just as it would now for any proposal. So the only area a minister is going to be allowed to create a sandbox is where there's legislation or regulation involved under their purview. So it's not carte blanche across the system. Mike may wish to add to that, but
I would simply just confirm categorically that the conflict of interest rules would still apply in the case of sandboxes.
And that's why, if I may, that's why I say there's a lot of misconception around on the regulatory sandboxes. All regulation, conflict of interest, code of ethics, everything applies on this. So there's no exemption. No one is exempt from it. So just to clarify, for the benefit of this committee and the Canadians who are watching, regulatory sandbox is only for that certain innovative testing. No one is exempt from any safeguard rules, regulations around that. So just for clarity.
Thank you for that, Minister. I agree with you in the sense that I think there are many misconceptions about the constraints. We call it a sandbox precisely because it's boxed in. Maybe to Mr. De Jong or to the Deputy, could you just very clearly for us lay out what are the constraints around the regulatory sandbox, the fact that they are temporary, that they apply only to specific projects? Could you help us just demystify this notion of a King Henry VIII clause?
Yes, absolutely. Foremost, a minister may only authorize a sandbox if it falls specifically within their authority. The sandbox must be narrowly defined and have a specific exemption for the purposes of supporting innovation, technological development, with the intent to eventually amend a regulation. The purpose of that sandbox would be to gather the necessary evidence and data in order to properly inform that regulatory development. Before a sandbox can be launched, the minister must be assured that it is in the public interest. In other words, that there's a proper analysis of the costs and benefits, that risks are identified and mitigated, that proper consultations have been undertaken with jurisdictions, stakeholders, and Indigenous peoples. There are also strict requirements for transparency at every step of the life cycle of a sandbox, including forward regulatory plans, when a sandbox is launched, and then in an annual report tabled in the House by the President of the Treasury Board.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Before we suspend, if I can just ask a couple quick questions. You may have answered it earlier. What is the projected cost of the early retirement buyout?
It's 1.5.
I saw
over 5 million.
1.9 billion?
1.5 over 5 years.
1.5. And Mr. Matthews, can you clarify, please? There is the unpermitted surplus above the 25. I understand that's been cleared out and put back into general revenue. Is that correct?
So, sorry, go ahead, Minister. The surplus at a point in time last year has been dealt with. Obviously, the actuary will continue
what is the
to
surplus sitting at right now? Is it above the unpermitted, or is it?
I haven't seen a recent actuarial report, but if the pension plan continues to do as well as it was doing in previous years, we will be close.
Right. Maybe the issue I have is I'm looking at under the Act under pensions, it says 7.3, retain the surplus to ensure the plan is at a prudent margin. And I'm just curious how paying this out, instead of paying out of general revenues, it seems to be kind of hidden, because you need to maintain the surplus at a prudent value, but you're clearing out 1.5, 1.9 out of it for the early buyout. But on the flip side, within the Act, if there's a deficit, the deficit has to be made up by taxpayers. It also states that when it is in a surplus, the government stops contributions, which is taxpayers stop contributions. So it looks to me like you're whittling down the surplus, and taxpayers are having to basically make it up. Taxpayers on the short are on the hook for any shortage or deficit of the pension. Therefore, any surplus, I would think, would go back into general revenues. And it looks like you are kind of playing fast and loose with the Act in several ways.
A response?
No, we're done. No, of course. Please go ahead, Mr. No, I'm asking Mr. Matthews because he's a bit more in tune with this.
No, I don't know whether it was a question or a statement by you. Or just wanted to get the clarity.
Both. I'm trying to figure out how it's justified, how it fits in with 7.3 that says that we should maintain or retain a surplus in the plan as a prudent margin. How we justify paying out this early buyout costs out of the pension when, the pension any deficit has to be made up by taxpayers. Therefore, the flip side is surplus generally belongs to taxpayers. The government, when it's in surplus, doesn't make contributions to it. The government, therefore, taxpayers. So it looks like this could reduce the surplus and eliminate the government from ending their contributions. You see what I mean? Well, I'm sure Mr. Matthews does.
So
I don't know if you're confused.
two very quick points here, Mr. Chair. Number one, when there was a non-permitted surplus above the 125%, it did indeed go back into CRF, as we've discussed. Right. Just remember, though, this pension plan is made up of investment income, obviously, that the plan has earned, but also contributions from both the employer, or as the Chair said, the taxpayer, but employees as well. So that fund is jointly funded.
But if it's in deficit, the employees don't make it up. Taxpayers do. Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate the fact that I'm new to this committee, but my understanding was that if the chair wanted to ask questions, he would take the time from a member of his caucus.
We are done, actually. So this is just Chair's prerogative to ask questions. But thanks. Go ahead, Mr. Matthews.
Sorry. So are we adjourned?
No, we're at the end of there's no more rounds for members. I'm just using Chair's prerogative to ask a couple questions at the end before we suspend.
Okay.
We do quite commonly in all committees. Just finish up, Mr. Matthews.
Very quick. So there was a point in time when the plan was in deficit that indeed got funded by the government, but then equally when the plan was recently in a surplus position above the authorized amount, that went back into CRF. So you have seen it move both ways, but the key point here, the pension plan itself is jointly funded by employer and employee.
I think a lot of things will agree to disagree. But anyways, we're going to suspend briefly, but before we do, actually, no, we'll suspend. We'll say goodbye to our guests.